Greetings to you. If you are still with us in this 6-part series on solving the water crisis in the Caribbean, you must be the type of person who is seeking much more than simply information and ideas. You must be one of those who is satisfied with nothing less than understanding what is going on. This is why I am calling this section Understanding Caribbean Water Wisdom. In the previous episode in this series, we explained the reasons why we think a regional approach to the Caribbean water crisis has failed so far to receive any meaningful attention. What has emerged at the regional level is a multi-country partnership model which focuses on integrated water resources management and climate change resilience. Secondly, the region's water security agenda has received most of its orientation and funding from the Global Water Partnership, which in itself acts as a content influencer as well as the host to the regional hub for knowledge and information sharing. Thirdly, the way in which the Global Water Partnership has defined the concept of transboundary water issues has little or no relevance to the transboundary water issues of the Eastern Caribbean. In spite of all those matters, climate change, population growth, and the weak infrastructure, in the Eastern Caribbean, the fundamental challenge to achieving water security is the uneven distribution of rainfall endowment among the islands. This is the conclusion that you cannot afford to miss because it is the game changer. In this and the next section, we are going to start by explaining two water resource management models. The current model, which is water demand management, and our new proposed model, which is water portfolio management. Hopefully, we will be able to convince you that this new model that we are proposing is the only one with the potential of transforming the current water supply chain in the Caribbean from being logical to becoming sustainable. Let us start with something that you would not have heard of before, simply because it is not part of the lexicon used in discussing Caribbean water issues. We call it Caribbean water wisdom. It is based on the belief that there is a Caribbean perspective on the water security crisis that is particular to our own reality, and that it is within this perspective that we should be sharing knowledge and awareness of water matters in order to transform our water use and our water policies. Our Caribbean water wisdom contains tools to achieve such objectives, and you can read them right now on your screen. There are 8 of them. 1. Journalism based on Caribbean water reality. 2. Learning from our Caribbean history of water woes. 3. How to truly leverage the value of water in our economy. 4. Water portfolio management, which is new. 5. Creating a sustainable water supply profile, which is also new. 6. Understanding the power in regional water security governance, which is also new. 7. Trading in bulk water exports-imports, which can be a model for success. And 8. Testing the requirements of a turnaround strategy for financial viability of our water utilities. These are all tied up in designing a regional cooperation strategy for solving the Caribbean water crisis. I usually keep these tools in the back of my mind whenever I'm evaluating foreigners telling us how to solve our water crisis. Throughout this series, you will find that a lot of the information and perspective I'm using will be coming from Caribbean journalism. You're being fed the same stuff as I am reading. So I am highlighting their reporting so that we can evaluate how accurate or how useful they have been to our understanding of this water crisis. Let us start by allowing the most prominent West Indian professional on water demand management to give us the opening lecture. In 2010, Professor Edwin Ekwe from the Faculty of Engineering at the University of the West Indies published this article on managing of water demand in the Caribbean, current practices and future needs. In his abstract, he speaks of water demand management as a means of optimizing the use of water in the Caribbean region. This is how he explains it. The management of water demand as an idea is now popularly practiced in many areas of the world as a way of making more water available for the populace. Well, that is not quite correct. You cannot increase the supply of water by managing the demand. Water demand management does not make more water available for the populace. What he really probably meant to say was that water demand management in reality is an attempt to make more of the populace available to the limited water resource. Why do we believe that this is what he meant? Well, it is a standard homegrown West Indian rule. Save some now so you can have some tomorrow. Or, from a more generous point of view, save some now so others may get some. But in the Caribbean, we are independent thinkers, so we may as well start practicing to say what we mean. Water demand management focuses on controlling the growth in demand, eliminating waste, and promoting conservation practices. It is all compatible with supporting and financing the expansion of the reach of our water delivery infrastructure. Essentially, water demand management is the model for bringing more people to the limited water supply. Or, as we will say in West Indianese, stretching it so it can last. But for the islands that do not have enough water within their own natural endowment to distribute to their people, water demand management, standing alone, does not tell us anything about how to expand the water supply infrastructure. There is an obvious need to provide an annex to this policy. That annex is where we talk about bringing more water into the system. So while the policy is to bring more people to the water, the annex is the part that deals with the supply side of bringing more water to the people. There's another way of understanding this. The point at which the desalination solution comes into the picture is as an annex to the water demand management. Why do I think this? Well, you do not hear any argument about building a desalination plant in Dominica. Dominica has adequate water resources. It does not need a supply side annex. It needs a distribution side annex. So I have brought you to the first caution sign in understanding the Caribbean water crisis, and it is this. Bringing more water to the people in Granville is a water management assignment. But when you are seeking to increase the water supply in the national water system, then that becomes a water governance assignment. Does it really matter? A lot. Now, the water demand management model has a lot of advantages when it comes to resolving a local water shortage situation. But do not confuse it with resolving a shortfall in the national water supply level. We have had a ton of experts warning us that the business as usual approach to water demand management will not cut it at the national supply level. Their conclusion has been that water demand management and its annexes cannot and I repeat, cannot close the growing gap between the national demand and the system's supply level. Here is a group from the prestigious Harvard University 2030 Water Resource Group. They're making the same point, that as a global phenomenon, water demand management with all its annexes will fail to close the gap between the demand and supply by 2030. These are folks who have dedicated their lives to forging collaboration with countries in order to strengthen their national water security. To them, the main challenge to water security is demonstrated in their model, which, even with all of the projections from the growth in technology, still predicts a persistent unfulfilled water gap, generally around 60% of the total water demand. So what is going on in their model? Well, their model anticipates that the national population will continue to grow and become more urbanized. People will be using their higher incomes to support more water-intensive lifestyle choices. This in itself will increase the demand for water across the economy, straining the capacity of municipal water systems in many countries and leaving our water utilities hopeless in their efforts to satisfy the local expectations. There is another phenomenon which is more familiar to us in the field of economics. It is called the Jevons paradox. This phenomenon occurs when technological advancements make a resource easier to use. So the ease of using the advancements ends up with further increasing the overall demand for that resource. Now, I know most of this may sound esoteric to you, but we feel that we can actually show you an example that raises our suspicion that the Jevons paradox is indeed real. On Thursday, 21st of January 2016, Prime Minister the Honourable Gaston Browne was making his budget speech in Parliament and surprised some of us with this simple confession, and I'm quoting him. Further, we increased the water supply to 6 million gallons per day. At that time, we were obtaining the maximum delivery of desalinated water from all available sources in Antigua. But we soon became aware that it still fell short of the national demand, which had grown to 8 million gallons per day. So why should the Prime Minister not expect that increasing the amount of desalination plants should provide the relief that Antigua so desperately needs in meeting its water demand? When it comes to understanding the national water system, there are always things there that you do not see. Simplicity in explaining water matters finds more comfort as a journalism fetish than as an economic analysis. Water is a very unique commodity. It is the only commodity for which there is no real substitute at any price. People have to get it, regardless of whether it costs $1 per liter or $100 per liter to produce. In that sense, you should not be referring to water simply as an essential commodity. You should call it what it is, an existential commodity. Thus, in the freshwater sector, there is one economics for water production, another economics for water distribution, and even another for water recycling. And in all of this, water governance is where the guardrails are set for the operation of water resource management. So if you are a journalist reporting about the APUA's digging new wells in Antigua, you are correct to consider this as a management decision aimed at increasing that portion of the total renewable water supply base in that locality. But when you are reporting about introducing another reverse osmosis plant, which is a production unit that is foreign owned, you need to be conscious of this fact, that arrangements like these are never made at the level of the utilities management. They have to go a little higher up to the level of those who are in charge of water governance. I make this difference between water resource management and water resource governance because there is a hidden principle that comes into play at the level of water governance that is not market-based and does not apply at the level of the utilities water management. A major part of water demand comes from trying to meet the basic needs of the population. This part is obligatory. All utilities must provide for that. In fact, you may consider the double obligation of the utility company as making water both available and affordable. But there is an order here that is of importance when we are dealing with an obligation that is not governed by economics. It is a principle not taught in the textbooks. In fact, the principle is so simple that most economists consider it too superficial to be worthy of recognition. But this is the principle. Before you can make water available to the public, you have first to make water affordable to the public. The principle of affordability preceding availability is the reason why we do not propose bottled water as a viable public water supply option. Imported bottled water is always available, but it cannot substitute as a public sector option simply because it is not affordable. To tell your population to use bottled water when nothing is coming out of the pipes is like Marie Antoinette recommending to the peasants call for bread, let them eat cake. Now, you may credit your own common sense for understanding this idea about affordability must precede availability. But let me assure you that most of the textbook economists in our regional institutions don't get it. Of those wannabe specialists who amplify their discovery that the water utility needs to increase its water rates to cover its distribution costs. Guess what? You are failing to understand the foundation principle of water demand. You need to return to the classroom and really study the economics of water distribution to the public in the Caribbean. And to your compatriots in the international financial institutions who rain down on us their models of marginal cost pricing for water, do the same. Save your breath in complaining about the size of the water subsidy and how much the general public ought to be grateful. The water subsidy is the godchild of this innocuous principle in water governance. Affordability must come before availability. So regardless of whatever source you may be amplifying to increase the water supply, producing more water in the system will always result in a water subsidy bill. I'm glad to have gotten that out of the way. I once addressed a meeting of the board of directors of the APUA in Antigua. It was in April the 13th, 2017. I remember it because it was the Thursday before Good Friday in that year. I was attempting to sell them water from Dominica at US $35 per 1,000 gallons. The general manager intervened to suggest that my proposal was totally unacceptable. Why would he buy water from me at $35 per 1,000 gallons when he has to sell it to the public at US $21 per 1,000 gallons? He conveniently neglected to mention that his unit produces less than 20% of the water it sells, and that the majority of it that he buys from the desalination plant, then Semcor, under a secret price deal, which at that time we had conservatively estimated to be over $70 per 1,000 gallons. even though he would be unwilling to reveal the true cost of the water he was purchasing. We knew at that time that the water truckers who were selling the supplies that they get from him were doing so at a price of 270 EC dollars per 1,000 gallons. Today, it is about 300 EC dollars per 1,000 gallons, or US $110 per 1,000 gallons. He knew that, but he chose to do his own performance posturing for the media that was present at the meeting, or for the members of the board who knew less. But then he was management and was in for an ugly surprise just 1 year later, when the full ramifications of the mistake in not distinguishing a water governance solution from a water management solution started to unveil on his unit. To some of you, this may appear difficult for you to digest because, as I said before, there is much more there than what you see. But the more you understand, the wider will become your visible range of the issues. Let us diverge for a moment and consider what a utility manager is actually allowed to do when his water supply system is disproportionately filled with desalinated water. You may not think of it this way, but desalination as a governance structure reduces water management to a robotic response. So when the negotiation with the desalination plant is complete, the foremost obligation of the utility management is now twofold. The first is to purchase all volumes of desalinated water produced by the plant at the agreed price and to distribute such volumes accordingly. The second is to figure out how he is going to pay for the desalinated water. These are robotic management responses. There is no game plan here. Under such conditions, the utility management has no management authority to make the tariff on the desalinated water pay for its supply. The governance principle of affordability before availability denies him that option. You see, bringing in an international company to develop your oil and gas resources is not the same as bringing in a desalination plant. The oil and gas developer will look to the international market to determine how he will be paid. But in the case of water, the desalination plant owner will look to you to decide how you will be paid. So before you join the chorus in hailing desalination as the solution for a thirsty world, you better figure out how you will pay for it. Under the governance of a desalination solution, the water utility management has no management tools that would allow it to change any conditions to increase the supply. He does not have the management capacity to incentivize an increase in the supply from the plant, nor does he have any authority to demand compensation for any shortfall in the expected outcome. These management prerogatives all simply disappear. Actually, the managers in the desalination plant find themselves with more power over the water supply chain than the public utility manager himself. Among their responsibilities are the following: to make sure that the government pays them for the water they produce, to align their production targets and goals with the minimum required to make the profit range, irrespective of what may be emerging in the market demand side, and to strictly limit their capital expenditures within the plant to achieve the negotiated supply levels. If you are the host government, you cannot go to the desalination plant and argue that because you guys are making so much money, we would like you to invest some of it back into expanding our water supply. You don't say, don't take all the profits home, guys. Invest some of it here. You will be barking up the wrong tree. There is another water management casualty that is the result of this governance decision. This one has to do with the level of efficiency in the nation's water delivery system. Sounds like a water scarcity issue, doesn't it? When desalination becomes the prominent mode of increasing the nation's water supply, the efficiency of the nation's system of supplying water is now expressed through the efficiency of the desalination plant. And the worst contradiction of it all is when you realize that the company that produces water from desalination is actually viewing your water scarcity problem as the foundation that ensures its profitability. The management is left with no choice but to sell this additional water supply at a tariff that is clearly below the cost of acquisition. Any local street vendor will tell you that selling at a price below what you are buying for is not a sustainable business. So, unless the state is making a larger than expected return on some other state services, the water subsidy can evolve into a specter of a suspected black hole at the center of our water universe. I think you have gotten the point by now. Now, before I give you the good news of how we can dig ourselves out of this watery rot, I have to give you a little more bad news. And this bad news comes from the way the Caribbean governments have attempted to leverage the value of water in our society. This is why leveraging the value of water in society is part of our Water Wisdom toolkit. What we have been witnessing in leveraging the value of water in our society has been pure performance posturing, and it has cost us dearly in a way that has been painful and regrettable. And what is worse, the Caribbean press has been unable to isolate this and let the rest of the population know what a sham we are passing for water wisdom right under our very nose. Some of our leaders have thought that because water is such an emergency need in our society, that the emergency itself can be used to leverage the value of water coming out of the desalination plant. This has been a colossal mistake. You cannot think that because Sembcorp is producing such a vital resource in our society, that you can bargain payments on credit and not on cash demand. In 2014, the Sembcorp desalination plant owned 78% of all desalination capacity in Antigua. At that time, 2014, Sembcorp was producing 3.5 million gallons per day and was owed by the government more than $22 million in arrears for water it had already sold to the authority. That was about $8 million in arrears. Where did this arrears come from? Well, it was the cost of the water subsidy arising from the government's principle of affordability first, which the water utility was attempting to pass on to the company by defaulting on its payment. Finally, in 2017, the management of the desalination plant announced that it was stopping water production because the water authority was not paying its bills. That would have meant 78% of Antigua's water supply, which was coming from desalination, was about to disappear from the system. You will understand why the cabinet had to come to the rescue of the utility, not the utility management team. We have on record a similar situation that developed in the island of Anguilla, but this time I will let the journalists do the reporting. In 2011, General Electric owned the desalination plant on the island of Anguilla. Again, the government was not paying for the water it was receiving. Elliot Harrigan describes these dramatic events in the Anguillan newspaper on Saturday, April 26, 2014, and I quote him. Recently, the Honorable Chief Minister tried to appease the people by addressing the matter of water distribution to the island, the water desalination plant, and the ongoing project at Sea Blue in the same proximity. Ironically, while the Chief Minister was preparing his script for the Anguillan newspaper, that is performance posturing, the plant was being torn down and shipped out of the island. So while we were reading the story from the government about their failure to finance the operation of the plant, we were also reading how the company that had built the plant had already contained it for shipment back to its suppliers. But you can only do that trick once. In 2022, the government of Antigua found a new company to expand its desalination base. This time, it was Seven Seas who entered the picture, touting about how desalination of seawater has to be part of the sustainable solution to the Caribbean water crisis. Yeah, right. It is in poor taste for a company like Seven Seas to align itself with a sustainable solution to water stress in the Caribbean, while we know that their own sustainability is limited to the profit margin they receive from satisfying part of that water demand gap. In a cynical way, this is the equivalent of the arms manufacturing company boasting that their production of arms holds the key to ending the war. But Seven Seas did have one advantage over our own water leaders. They allowed themselves to be informed continuously by the past in Antigua. How we know this? Well, none other than the CEO of Seven Seas told us that. At the signing of the contract, the CEO of Seven Seas proudly made the following statement. Now, he may have said many other things during the signing ceremony, but this was the statement that caught the attention of the reporters, and I quote from them. This is what the CEO said. This is a contract where we invest our money and only get paid if and when we deliver water to the quantity and quality as described in the contract, which we believe is the definition of a successful public-private partnership. Wow, what a statement. There is a lot to unpack here. Firstly, the man is telling everyone who has ears to hear when he expects to get paid. That is, when Seven Seas delivers water, not 3 to 5 years after they have delivered the water. This is not Sembcorp 2.0. We can also observe from what he does not say that this is an open-ended contract. He does not say that if at any time he fails to deliver the quantity that he is contracted for, his company can attract a penalty for damages caused to the Antiguan public. He gets paid only when he delivers water to the quantity and quality as described in the contract. So if it takes him 3 months to deliver that quantity, there is nothing that you can do to him in the interim that would make him compensate for the loss of the volume of water in the national water system. We have the evidence to support our assumption that the part that was not said is real. In February 2023, the desalination plants in Antigua had to significantly reduce production capacity to 11 million gallons per day, while the demand remained at approximately 13 million gallons per day. The turbidity of the ocean had made the intake of water from the sea too risky to pursue. So rather than risk damage to its separation membrane, the folks in Antigua were left without their limited supply. The cabinet held discussions with the general manager of APUA, not the general manager of the desalination plant, by phone on the challenges posed by this shortfall in production and distribution of potable water. Unbelievably, the Antiguan press, The Observer, came up with this astonishing breaking news. The APUA to construct wells to rectify water supply issues. Now, the casual observer would think that he is safe in assuming that this was an announcement that the Antiguans were trying to increase the supply of groundwater. No, this was not that. After paying millions of dollars to these folks to supply us with desalination water, the APUA, having no power to demand compensation for an apparent failure in the contract, was now willing to spend additional millions of dollars to dig deep trenches near the coast into which filtered water from the sea can flow. The post-cabinet report noted that the construction of such wells will allow the seawater to remain the source for desalination, even during those times when the sea outside was too rough to be involved. Wait a minute. Who came up with this solution, and why do they think that it is their obligation to help solve a plant production problem? And to add insult to injury, these folks could have used half of the cost of these deep wells they planned to dig to import double the volume of water from Dominica and start solving their problems by themselves. Is this their best shot at water wisdom? So, my friend, this desalination plant idea is not really tied to resolving the water crisis situation. The only thing that the desalination drive has given to us in history is a subsidy bill, which in 2024 totaled a whopping $27 million annually. We mentioned this marker because the feasibility of any alternative plan can only be judged by its capacity to reduce the total water subsidy bill from this level of $27 million. The report behind this announcement said this. During the post-cabinet media briefing, Chief of Staff Lionel Hurst confirmed that the government is reviewing ways to make the water sector more sustainable without resorting to privatization. Water is a loss leader, says the Chief of Staff Hurst. We are essentially giving it away, especially through standpipes in low-income communities where water is provided free of charge. Wow, what does that sound like to you? A combination of sympathy and fear. Fear as to where this will inevitably lead his government. Does the cabinet really think that it is generosity that is overwhelming its water policy? Don't they need a strong dose of water wisdom? What do you think? Leave a comment below. Please hit the like button, and most importantly, share this with your friends. Thank you.